Hi, my name is Robert Chelle with Chelle Law, and I'm an attorney that assists physicians with employment contract and independent contractor agreement issues. And today I'm going to talk about RVU versus salary compensation for physicians. So, what are the main differences between being paid on RVUs or some kind of base salary compensation, and then maybe some hybrids and some things to be careful to avoid when you're entering into a contract with these type of compensation models. So first, it is uncommon for a private practice to use RVUs. Most of the time, when a organization uses RVU compensation, it's either a hospital or a healthcare network. So that's the first thing to think about. If you're in private practice, RVUs occasionally are used, but most of the time, if they're paying some kind of either productivity or collections-based bonus, it is a percentage of the collections that the practice actually receives. Whereas an RVU, which stands for relative value unit, and at least for a physician, it's the work RVU that matters. It's only what's produced. It doesn't matter what's collected. All right. So how would the model work? Normally, if you enter into, let's just say you're moving into a hospital, you would have at least a guarantee period for a period of time, usually the first year or two. You would never want to enter into a job when you are paid purely on production or purely on RVUs from the very beginning. Why? Well, it takes time to build up a practice. Now, this could be specialty dependent, or I guess it is specialty dependent. You know, if you're doing hospice work or ED work, something where it's just shift based and you kind of have no control over who comes in and who doesn't. Normally you're just paid either an hourly rate or a shift rate. RVUs are not involved in that. But if you're in private practice and let's say you're in primary care and you're trying to build up, maybe they just open up a new clinic, it takes time to build up a patient base. And so if you're paid purely on production or RVUs from the beginning and the clients aren't there, you're going to make less money. So you want a guaranteed, and what I would suggest is just a guaranteed base salary for the first year or two. And then if you're in a health network that uses RVU production, how they would transition it is they would take maybe your production from the last 6 months to a quarter, and then they would use whatever that amount was prorated, and you would get a base draw based on that. And so let me give an example. So let's say you, generated an amount that would equal $100,000 in the fourth quarter of the previous year. So $400,000 would be what you would make, on an annual basis. They would take that amount, annualize that over 12 months, and then back it off, usually somewhere between 80 to 85%. And then that's what you would get as a base draw for the next year, the 80% of 400,000. And then they would do a reconciliation at the end of the month, or perhaps the quarter, or maybe even the year. And then they would look at, all right, these are the RVUs you generated times whatever compensation factor they use versus what they paid out to you. If they paid out more, then you could perhaps have a negative balance. You get no bonus compensation. Where if you produced more than they actually paid out, then you would get that bonus, usually within 30 days of the end of, whatever period they're using to determine the bonus. So that's a fair model and a fair way of doing it. The biggest X factor in any kind of RVU compensation is the monetary number, the compensation factor number used. So I guess I probably should have explained this at the beginning. How they would do it is they take the RVUs you generate, multiply that times a comp factor. Now, the comp factor can vary based upon specialty. It can go usually somewhere between $40 all the way up to $90 to $95 for the high-level specialties. And you just multiply the two, and then that's what you would make. The comp factor normally is negotiable. It's based upon kind of industry standard amounts, but that is something that you can negotiate. Now, other ways of doing it would be you get a base salary, and then they'll have an RVU threshold. So once again, using kind of industry standard amounts for your specialty, they would say you must produce 1,500 RVUs this quarter, and then any RVU above that, you would get whatever the comp factor is. It's let's say you produced 500 RVUs per quarter over, and then they multiply that times $40, and then you get 500 times 40, and that's what your bonus would be at the end of each quarter. So figuring out if you have a productivity threshold and it's fair, figuring out what your either draw or base comp is going to be, figuring out the RVU compensation factor. These are all variables that are very important. The main thing that you don't want to do is go into a job where you are paid maybe, let's say you have a base salary at the 25th percentile, but their bonus thresholds are in the 75th percentile. You want them to be relatively even, meaning if your base comp is in the 50th percentile, you would want your productivity threshold to be at the 50th percentile as well, and then any amount that you produce over that, you would be bonused on. All right, well, if you have any questions about RVUs, employment agreement, independent contractor agreement, feel free to contact my law firm. The information is listed below in the description, and I appreciate you watching the video. All right, take care.